Hello everybody and welcome back. I'm Christo and this is a look at the Nestonar's latest video on Grey Eminence. Latest dev diary on Grey Eminence, the next level grand strategy that we are all looking forward to. It is a rather tardy video, but you want to hear about geography. I will talk about why there's been a break in my content at the end. For now, dev diary, let's take a look. So, geography. I have read this before. First off, look at this freaking art. It's so pretty. I really like this this art style. It's very cool. Geography. I've read this before, so this is not a kind of react. I'm not going to go all the way through it. I should, hopefully, remember to put a link to this in the description. If you want to check that out, do go and read through it all yourself. But we're going to go through this one just, picking out what I think are the most interesting bits. So basically, they're just talking about how the land is arranged, what the different factors there can be for land. So, like in EU4, which is, the obvious example for me to go to, there aren't very many terrain and geographical features, right? Land can be, a tile rather, can be a sea tile or a land tile. If it's a land tile, it can have one terrain type. There can be river crossings. Is that it? No, there are monsoon areas and there are different degrees of winter. Is that it? I think that's it, right? In terms of EU4 terrain. So that's what I'm going to think about as basically the, this is the baseline. Let's take a look and try and see what Grey Eminence is going to do to try and, push it to the next level, as they have been doing with so many of their other features. They are obviously not using EU4 as a base, but just for my analysis, that's where I come from when I'm thinking about Grey Eminence. Basically, how is it gonna top the existing grand strategies that we have? So, terrain, climate. Okay, so these are things that EU4 already has, and other Paradox games and other grand strategies have already had. But as we'll see, they go into it significantly more. Land size. So this is a feature that Mayo and Taxis has had, which is quite interesting about capacity to do stuff. And Victoria 3, I think, has this as well. Not that I've played that or whatever, or at least not for a while. And then forest cover. So this is another interesting mechanic. I don't think there's forest cover in M&T, but anyway, enough comparisons. Let's keep looking at what they've got here. So, a fairly simple model for terrain that mainly differentiates tiles based on practical features, with 7 total terrain types. Okay, so obviously not a huge number of different terrain types, but I quite like this. The desire to achieve complexity by making there a great deal of potential categories is, to me, far less interesting than allowing nuance between a certain number of categories. So, for example, I booted up Distant Worlds 2 the other day. And it had an unbelievable number. I'm going to enjoy it. This is not hating on Distant World 2s, but it has an unbelievable number of resources, right? There's just tons and tons of resources, and they all have names. They're all fake names, I think. Some of them might not be, but most of them are fake names that kind of sound like elements with 120 protons or something. And I just don't know what any of it means. It's having it in smaller buckets and then having nuance, I think, is a more interesting way than just kind of throwing loads and loads of different categories. But it's just my take. So plains, hills, and mountains are the most common. Peaks and plateaus. Okay, so peaks are impassable. Okay, that's good to know. So again, impassable tiles don't exist in. No, they do. There are impassable tiles in EU4, but they're not tiles per se. So I'm interested to see if peaks. Can you have a population on a peak? Like, they're impassable to an army. I assume that's what they mean by traversed. And maybe also, like, goods can't traverse them. But I'm curious as to whether you can, hermits, a couple of hermits living on a peak. And then plateaus are another one. That makes sense to be a separate category, right? Plateau is very different to a plain. But let's make sure I try and keep this on screen. But floodplains and wetlands. Okay, cool. So wetlands, presumably, yes, you can drain wetlands into plains, which I assume will dramatically increase their potential agricultural output, which would be cool. And floodplains are, where you're going to focus your irrigation investment and get some awesome food output and all that good stuff. So here's an example of terrain. Terrain is hills are plus 10% effective distance, which I assume means basically it takes 10% more time to cross a hill than a plain. basically, which seems low, but obviously all numbers and graphics are not final. But it takes more construction materials to build here. I assume that's what that means. It's not totally clear. This could kind of sound like it produces more construction materials, but anyway, as ever, UI is not final. I'm not trying to nitpick on UI yet. The devs have said that I can, but not that I need their permission in the videos. I mean, like they don't mind me nitpicking to them, but I think I've basically decided I'm not going to nitpick on UI stuff until there is, and if there is, a beta, because I think it's the right time to give that kind of nitpicky feedback once the systems are basically finished. Anyway, it's better fort defense and less agricultural efficiency in hills. That makes perfect sense. Climate. So they're using the Köppen climate classification system, which you can read about if you like. Has implications for agriculture and weather. That makes perfect sense. 5 general categories: tropical, dry, temperate, continental, and polar. Again, I like small categories, nuance within them. Perfect. And also, it seems like how they've identified which category these things fall into is actually based on like stats. So if it's above 18 degrees C across all months, then tropical climates will be either rainforest or savanna. That's really cool. Theoretically, their growth season can encompass the entire year. It's where you want to settle in RimWorld if you're a coward like me. Okay, so we've got dry areas like arid and semi-arid. We've got subtropical. Some of you will be really interested in going through all this in detail, to be honest. I'm not particularly. This is not the bit that really excites me. So I'm going to skip over it a little bit just to note that there's definite effects from this stuff. So animal husbandry can be impossible in various areas. Maximum agricultural potential can be very low in a highland or a boreal area. That's really interesting. So they're not. It's not like EU4 where there's just whatever dev cost increase or something. There's serious restrictions in different areas, and that will result in some kind of geographical determinism, which is really cool. So one of the things that's missing in EU4 is a recognition that various areas of the world are just geographically more suited to things like industrialization, urbanization, mass agriculture, food production, stuff like that. And that will create some interesting historical outcomes, I think, now that we've got more of those systems actually feeding into how the game plays out, which I think is really cool. Land size. So there is land size, there is 110 units per tile, okay, which is basically because each one is more or less a square kilometer. So we'll just think about them as 510 kilometers squared per tile. And yeah, anything you want to build occupies a certain amount of space, so you can't build a tile up indefinitely, which is really cool because what that will mean is urban sprawl, which I think is very cool. I don't know how big a city would have to get before it's going to start sprawling to multiple tiles. 510 square kilometers of a city seems pretty big in 1356, but by 1950, not so much. So I'm really excited to see that kind of sprawling out, and whether it will make sense. I mean, are we even going to get into like city planning? Like if you had a 20 tile city, is it going to make sense to like prioritize building through north and south, east and west through roads, or build roads on all the tiles? Or it's going to be pretty cool, I think. The idea of multi-city tiles is exciting to me. And then forest cover. This makes perfect sense, right? You can hunt on places with forests. You can deforest them in order to presumably get some short-term resources, and then also make it more farmable afterwards, which is cool. And there's a percentage of forest cover. Yeah, a certain number of the 510 tiles which are covered in forest on each tile. There's a degree of areability. Is it areability or arability? Arable land. Yeah, I think it's arable. Arability and grazability. So the degree to which you can, get your arable stuff going, get your agriculture. And the degree of grazability, so the amount of arable husbandry. So presumably there'll be areas that are not very arable but plenty grazable, like some Scottish Highlands and stuff where it's really quite difficult to grow all but the hardiest crops, but you can graze sheep really easily. So there'll be some, again, that cool geographical determinism, making different areas develop differently based on the geography is very cool. Weather, so they've got seasons, storms, monsoons, hurricanes, and tornadoes. What the heck is how are you going to represent tornadoes on the map? That's going to be interesting. And yes, rivers. Rivers again work. Sounds like pretty much like all modern Paradox games. That is, they only exist between tiles, not in tiles. However, they are also important for logistics, unlike previous grand strategy games, which is really, really cool. And I'm assuming there's going to be, river crossing penalties and bridges. Maybe you can't even cross a river unless there's some kind of degree of I don't know, transport infrastructure, road, bridge, however that's going to work. And then I'm not going to go deeply onto the modability. Safe to say they've built it with modability in mind. And here's a pretty cool example of their map terrain editor, which a lot of you will have seen on the Reddit or the Discord, I know, because this was getting shared around a lot. Obviously, the UI doesn't look amazing here. That's because it's not designed to be used in-game, whatever. And even if it were, all the UI is non-final. But the ability to just draw on the map like this, can you imagine how much easier it's going to be to create modded maps than in things like EU4? Very, very exciting. So that, in a nutshell, is geography. Thank you very much for watching. Lots of exciting ways in which the world can develop along not only historical but also kind of plausible outcomes based on the light determinism implied by some of these geographical systems, which I am very excited to see play out. And I will see you all in the next one, where we will take a look at teaser time, religion. I will see you then. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.